God is constantly interacting with humanity throughout Scripture. And one of the primary means in which He relates to us is through a covenant. A covenant is basically just an agreement that mutually binds two parties together. And marriage is a great example for us today of what a covenant looks like. The Bible contains several covenants that really guide the narrative and serve as an important backdrop for the stories that we find in Scripture. It's important for us to be aware of some of these key covenants as we're reading through Scripture. The first covenant we find is really implied in Genesis 1 and 2 with Adam and Eve. Humanity is created by God and is underneath His authority. And God provides a cultural mandate for mankind to be fruitful and to multiply and to have dominion over all the earth. Humanity was charged to be God's subordinate rulers, in essence, here on the earth. Another major covenant occurs later on with God and with a person named Noah. Following creation and the installment of that first covenant, Adam and Eve sinned and broke the covenant. In the years that followed, sin continued to grow throughout and spread throughout the world. And as a result, God sends a catastrophic flood to judge the evil in the world. But God makes a covenant with Noah and with his family to save them from the flood. And then God makes a covenant with Noah to never again destroy the earth by a flood. This covenant is extended to all of creation. Then in Genesis 12, we read that God chooses a man with whom He wants to make a new covenant. In this passage, God says that He will bless Abraham, making his descendants into a great nation. And as a result of this, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed through him. Through the descendants of Abraham, the nation of Israel would be formed. And most importantly, the Messiah, Jesus, would eventually come through him, and all of us could be reconciled back to God because of that. Years later, God makes a covenant with the nation of Israel underneath the leadership of Moses. This is following their release from their captivity in the nation of Egypt. And this foundation of this covenant is basically the Ten Commandments. The additional laws and regulations that we see in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy are built upon these initial Ten Commandments as well. And the basic premise of this whole covenant was that if you obey God, you'll experience blessing, but if you disobey God and His commandments, you'll be punished. Now, although this covenant is focused on the single nation, it definitely has universal applications for us. It is from this covenant and the formation of Israel that Jesus would come to us. He would be the means by which everybody can enjoy the benefits of the good news of the gospel. Another key covenant we read about is with Israel's greatest king, essentially, David. God makes a covenant with David that establishes his throne and his descendants forever. In the decades to come, an ancestor of David would always be on the throne. Eventually, the true king, Jesus, would come from David's line as well. And then the final major covenant that we see in Scripture is the New Covenant, the New Testament. This covenant represents the relationship that we can now have with God because of Jesus' work on the cross. We are reconciled to God by grace through faith in what Jesus did for us in His death and resurrection. And we are adopted into God's family and called His children. And this covenant spans obviously all of the New Testament. The unifying theme in all of these covenants, though, is that God is reaching out to us. It shows that God desires a relationship with us and highlights His incredible grace to us.